And it's good to be back to have life stories. We welcome Paul. I'm not actually doing anything apart from just saying hello to you. And at the end, I'll walk around with a microphone for the questions that you're going to ask. But right now, I'm just going to hand over to Nick. And we're looking forward to this evening, Paul. Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're very glad you're here, Paul. Paul Sanders, who reached the highest levels of the newspaper industry with the prestigious role of the picture editor of the Times. But just over 10 years ago, the stress of the job led to a severe mental health trauma and a visit to Beachy Head, which changed but might have ended his life. But more of that later. First, Paul, again, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Your serious interest in photography started when you were at school. How was that?
Yeah, I just thought it would be a really cool job to do. It looked a lot more glamorous than working in a factory or a shop. So I used to borrow my dad's camera. When him and Mum went off to the supermarket on a Saturday morning, I'd take the camera out of his wardrobe, which lived in his box, and go and take pictures in the garden. I used to take his film out and put mine in and then wind his film back on when they came up. And my dad was convinced he was like a genius because he got all these lovely multiple exposures, but it was actually my inability to count that led to his creativity. And I just fell in love with it. It was magic. And when I told the careers advisor at school, she was like, "Oh, you can't be a photographer. We don't know how to help." And actually, you're not very good at very many subjects, and I think you'll need all of them to be a photographer. So I left school and promptly started work as a photographer, shooting calendars and sort of fashion work in Spain.
So you went from school without the encouragement of the careers.
Yes.
We've heard that before.
Yes, yeah.
But you went straight to be freelance. Now,
Yeah.
in my experience, freelance is the most risky thing you can do, and you did it very early. Were you just courageous or unusually talented?
Stupid, to be honest. I really didn't know what to expect, and I met a photographer who needed another photographer and needed some assisting, so I just made myself indispensable. And I don't like education. I mean, it's not overrated, as I tell my son, but it's not the be-all and end-all, because enthusiasm, passion, doing something that you absolutely love is really, really important. So yeah, I just dived straight in. I mean, I made a big mess. I made a real mess. I got so much stuff wrong, but I was learning from my mistakes.
Yeah. And so it was a range of things you did in those first couple of years?
Well, mostly fashion work. That was the first 2 or 3 years. And then I had a falling out with the photographer that I was working with, and we decided that, I think what they call it in the record industry, we had a difference of creative opinion. And I was too young really to have an opinion. Yeah. But I didn't like the way things were shaping up. So
why did you go into newspapers, which you did after about 3 years?
Yeah, I needed a job. I came home and I'd spent all the money that we'd earned. I mean, I had a really good time, but we were paid around about £6,000 a shoot, and we were doing a shoot every 2 to 3 months. So as an 18-year-old, I had a lot of money, and I blew the lot. I mean, my dad said, "Save it for your pension," and I was like, "That'll never come." And now I can start claiming my pension next year because I'm 55 next year. I can claim one of them anyway. So I actually wish I'd saved, but I just wanted to have a really good time. And I did, and now I don't regret it, because had I not had a really good time, it wouldn't have led me to the Daventry Express, where I got my first full-time proper job in photography.
Which is a big change
Huge.
from fashion, a shoot, which is in a studio, where solidly within a building.
Mm-hmm.
But photography for a newspaper.
Yeah.
Please go, someone's fallen out of a window. Yes,
it was a huge change, and I loved it. I do 12 different jobs a day. If you imagine, like the Sevenoaks Chronicle, it was that type. The Daventry Express was that type of paper, and we would do everything from this kind of event in an evening. We'd do children's fetes. On a Saturday, I'd do 2 football matches and a rugby match, all kicking off at 3 o'clock in different parts of the area. You're effectively a racing driver with a camera. And you would get to do 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, but you learn so much about people management, and you learn to shoot for particular pages in the newspaper. And I just loved it. It was fantastic. I mean, most of the news was absolute rubbish, but occasionally we had some really, really good stories, and that's when you come to life. And I loved seeing my pictures published. It was a fantastic thing in the morning, the day, because we were a weekly newspaper, to go, and buy a sandwich at lunchtime and see somebody looking at the picture that you'd taken the day before. It wasn't so good when you went to the chip shop the next week and saw them wrapping. Those were the days when you were allowed to wrap chips in newspaper. Or you see your work in the bin. It's a bit of a weird thing, because you know that everything you do is completely disposable. But it also allows you a completely fresh start every week.
But it's interesting, because obviously it is the taking of photographs that is really so important to you, and
Yes.
yet very soon you went into management.
Yes, yeah. There are 2 types of photographers in newspapers. There are those that are great photographers, and there are those that are good operators. A good operator understands the story and can work that to his advantage. A good photographer is one of those people who can go along and make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, and gets a gift from God as the light streams down and all the other photographers miss it. I was in the missing it category, but a good operator. Good operators tend to make good picture editors.
And by your early 30s, you had reached the Times as
Yes.
a picture editor.
Yes.
That's amazing,
Yeah.
because you're choosing other people's work,
Yeah.
and you're choosing. It's the choice is fascinating, because it's not only creative, but it's moral. It's political.
Yeah, I mean, we would get, on an average day, somewhere between 17 and 20,000 pictures into the paper. That's only on an average day. So on a busy day, it was upwards of 50, 60,000. And when you look through the paper, there's about 200 in a paper. So you can see the editing job that somebody like me had to do. And I have a team of people to support, but the decisions on the pictures came down to me.
There's a cynical slogan that if it bleeds, it leads. Were you under pressure from the circulation department to put things in that you didn't want to put in?
No, it's more, the Times operates in a slightly different way, because it's more led by what the owner and the editor want. The circulation department, they have some control. They don't ever interact with the picture desk. So you're offering pictures up that suit the paper's style, that suit the political stance on a story, that don't offend the editor's friends, that won't upset Rupert Murdoch, and ideally haven't yet been in the Daily Mail. Weirdly, every single newspaper judges itself against the Daily Mail, because that's the most successful. So if we missed a picture of a pig wearing Wellington boots for the sake of argument, all hell would let loose. That'll be the Daily Mail calling. Shut him up about pigs in Wellington boots. So if we missed a picture that was in the Mail the next morning, all hell would let loose, and then we would have to run that picture. And even if I'd shown the editor the picture, because we have a conference where you show all the pictures, even if I'd shown it, he would deny ever seeing it until it appeared in the... Because they never want to be responsible for things that go wrong. It's always somebody else's fault. I was good at taking the blame.
But it's interesting. They say a picture paints 1,000 words.
Yes.
So your choice is very significant, not only to please the editor, but by what it says.
Yes.
I mean, you can take photographs of a politician, and one photograph would show him as a charismatic leader, but another one a few minutes later as a cheap rabble-rouser.
Yes.
How do you make those decisions?
Depends on what the Westminster office is saying about them, whether they've got any future. whether we like them. I mean, interestingly, Michael Gove used to be the Saturday editor for the Times, and he features quite heavily in some of the more humorous pictures that appear now. I don't know whether you're fans of Michael Gove or not, but I remain neutral.
You were soon promoted yet again and were responsible for the entire look of the paper at a very interesting and critical time. It's a time when it moved from broadsheet to what most of us call tabloid, but the Times insist on calling compact.
Compact, because we're a bit more upmarket than that. They wanted somebody who understood photography to look after the compact. And I'd always been fairly vocal about how poor our picture usage was. So they put me in charge of it. And I rose to the challenge. I just loved it. It was fantastic fun. We were a very small team, but we got completely sort of turned over by the main paper. So if you imagine, you've got one paper which is a tabloid, compact, being produced in a broadsheet. The broadsheet has all the history and all the tradition, and nobody on the broadsheet side wanted the tabloid to succeed. So they would deliberately not pass information to you so that it might fail. And you would think that two things in the same building, working for the same editor, would actually work together to make a stronger project. No, they would set traps to trip you up. It was like being in the playground. It was really pathetic and very frustrating, but also great fun. And I did enjoy it.
And your role there, you are, and you were particularly before that, a photographer.
Yes.
But now you're responsible for the whole thing. And most of us wouldn't know, I certainly wouldn't know, a newspaper, what the typeface was, what the font size was, and you get a feeling a bit about the layout, but all those are things which you put a lot of thought into that shape.
Well, when we launched the compact, we completely redesigned the typeface so it would fit in a smaller format, so that we could get every word that was in the broadsheet into the compact. And people said, "Oh, you're dumbing down," and actually we weren't dumbing down at all, because the way we'd squeeze the words together, we were getting more in, so we were dumbing up. If that's I don't know whether dumbing up is a phrase. We'll make it a phrase. It's fascinating. The psychology around newspapers and how people read them, the pace and the light and shade that appear into them is really, really important. They're not just slapped together. There's so much research done into how people read a newspaper. So wherever you start from, your speed of reading through the newspaper is dictated by the way the layout works. And people always say, "Oh, you don't cope. I beat you because I start at the sports pages." And so, well, actually, whether you start at the back or the front, the crossword, the letters page, wherever you start, the pace that you read out from is dictated by the layout and the little quote boxes and the cartoons, and it's like you're supposed to read it like that. It's like riding a wave.
We don't realise we're being manipulated.
You're being completely manipulated by the power of Rupert.
So, about 10 years ago,
yes,
you at the peak of a high-flying career, top job at the top paper.
Yeah.
But there were great sacrifices you were having to make to get there and to stay there.
Yeah, my health started to suffer. They're long days in newspapers. Sort of 12 to 14 hours is an average day. And to battle with the stress, I would cycle from Sevenoaks, where I lived, Riverhead, because you all know where Riverhead is, Riverhead into Wapping every day, and most days I would cycle home as well. And I couldn't get on top of the stress. I was having sleepless nights. One of my photographers sadly took his own life while on assignment for me. And the build-up, it was like layers and layers of stress. And then my marriage started to go pear-shaped as well, because I was never at home, I was always working. And everything that I thought I valued in that job suddenly started to just sort of ring hollow. And then I had my breakdown, so I was suffering with really bad insomnia. And I just had a complete meltdown, which was no fun at all.
Which is where Beachy Head, which I mentioned at the beginning, came in.
Yeah, I mean, I left the Times at the end of 2011. It was actually New Year's Eve 2011. And when you leave somewhere that is as fast moving as that, it was like being thrown overboard. I felt completely lost. I felt a failure because I'd had this top job. I had a good marriage. Well, I thought I did. My ex-wife thought otherwise, but that's okay. We can forgive her for that. I'd got a lovely son. I thought I'd let my parents down because they'd always counselled against being a photographer. I'd let myself down, and I just thought, I'm just nothing. And I just felt I was literally just spinning in this kind of emptiness, and I'd lost my identity because I'd started to become the job. A friend of mine even bought me a badge that said, "I am the picture editor of the Times," and insisted that if I went to the pub with them that I wore it because it was good fun. And I didn't, thankfully, but when people start identifying you as the job, they miss you, the person, and there's a real person under that veneer. And for that job, it had to all be veneer because I'm quite shy. I lack confidence. I'm a people pleaser. So the more I tried to do my job well, the more undermined I was by the knockbacks. And then when Richard sadly took his life, that literally knocked me sideways. And everything. It was just this perfect storm of stress and pressure, and I just thought, that's it. I've had enough. I don't need to be here.
And what was in your mind when you went to Beachy Head?
To jump.
It was?
Yeah. I had been up a couple of days before. I'd chosen my spot. I knew the quietest time, and I didn't want to involve anybody else. So I just thought I was going to go up there. And I went out and I did the great thing where you pretend to be doing something else so that people don't stop and ask you. So I just took my camera up, put it on a tripod, and just sat and watched the sun go down. And then the next bit is actually quite humorous. You wouldn't believe suicide could be humorous, but I was pacing around waiting because it was amazing. When you're waiting to do something, the amount of joggers and dog walkers and kids on bikes that I was just like, this is unbelievable. It's so busy. And I was pacing because I was getting a little bit agitated, and I kicked my light meter by mistake, and my light meter went over the edge of the cliff, and I dived to grab my light. Why I needed to save it, I honestly don't know, because I wasn't going to use it again, but it was expensive, so I dived to grab it, and I saw it just go, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's going to hurt. That's going to really hurt. And I sat back down and I just burst into tears because I then realised that I couldn't do it. So then I was a failure at killing myself. And I just thought, God, I'm such a failure. I'm such a loser. And then out of nowhere, this chap just turned up and just started talking to me, asking if I was okay, and reassuring me that I was fine and I didn't need to jump and there was a whole world of life and he actually said, your mission isn't complete. And I said, I have no mission, I have nothing. And he said, no, he said, you think you have nothing, but you have everything. And he sat with me for ages. I mean, I literally soaked this guy's shoulder. He was absolutely lovely. He was so patient and so kind. And he said to me, do you want to go? He said, normally, when we stop people, we take them to Eastbourne Hospital, where you're effectively left for 24 hours to get over it. He said, do you want to go to hospital? I said, no, I think I want to go home. And he said, that's okay. So I got home, the police were waiting for me. And there's nothing more horrible than the police waiting at your doorstep, having contacted all of your friends as well. And this policeman, I think if he was 14, and I was like, my mum always said, when policemen start to look younger, you suddenly realise how old you are. And I was thinking, oh my goodness. And he's really, he's like, so, going to jump, were you? And I was like, oh, blimey. And I tried to I did that thing where you sort of tried to convince him that I was taking photographs. It was all a misunderstanding. And weirdly, that for me was a massive turning point because I really felt my faith come alive at that point.
So I think you said you had been a Christian for 10 years at that stage, and I think
Yes.
you said on and off.
Yes.
More off than on, if I'm honest.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Christianity was one of those. I joined a church shortly after I left the Daventry Express, and that was fine, but it was a bit competitive. It was all about who was the best Christian and who read the most Bible and who could go to the most out-of-church events and who was the most holy and who shook everybody's hand in town. And I quite enjoyed it. I'm a competitive person, so naturally I wanted to be the most Christian. So I actually got baptized in the Sea of Galilee. Right? You can't be more. and it's terrible because that should be a really key turning point. And actually I got baptized and I came back to church and I did the testimony and they played the video. And afterwards everybody's going, "Oh, you're so much like a rock star, it's so cool." And I just thought, yeah, it's cool, but it's empty. It's completely empty. A bit like
That was earlier when you were at the Daventry Express.
That's much earlier in my career. It's so empty. And it was the same at the Times. I'd reached the top and there was nothing there. It was just hollow. I had money, I had a nice house, I had a nice car, I was lucky, I had a lovely wife and a nice kid, he was in a good school, and I had nothing. I was so desperately unhappy. And it was the same with, when I got baptized, I was just like, this, I was expecting trumpets and angels and lights and clouds to part and nothing. And yet weirdly, at Beachy Head, everything. It was everything I thought my baptism would have been, but at a really low point in my life.
So you've come back from Beachy Head.
Yeah.
Everyone knew about it, even without it going into the Times.
I'm so glad it didn't.
But so what was you? I think prayer was part of what made the difference.
Yeah, prayer started to really take on a new meaning for me because I didn't know who I was and my friends were all newspaper based. I didn't have any friends. I had acquaintances and people that I thought were friends, but actually they only wanted me because I gave them work or I could get them a staff job or I could buy camera gear for them. And I suddenly found I got nobody. And prayer was the thing that I turned to, just quietly, and always very privately. But I suddenly started to really take on board a lot of the things that I'd heard when I was much younger. The Lord's Prayer, how, when you're at school, you just repeat it because you're supposed to repeat it. You have no understanding of the strength of the words. And suddenly it just started to click. And there was... It was like a little... I describe it as like a little fire within me. And it was about time that I started to find out who I was, because I didn't know who I was. The people at Bessel's, where I normally go to church, I'm hoping they don't think I'm unfaithful by coming here. I shouldn't have put it on social media this morning. I'll get a black mark next time I go. But I suddenly realised that I had no idea who I was. I had no idea what I liked, what I needed. All I knew was that I needed to be committed to my faith. And some way it would be okay.
You got to know who you were, but if you're praying, you need to know who you're praying to. So
yes.
How did you understand
who
God was?
I had a lot of chats with people about how to pray, why you pray. The minister at Bessel's then, Neil Durling, and then later Charlie, were both very patient with all of my questions. And I started to get an understanding of God through almost weirdly, it sounds really strange when I say it, but becoming friends with myself. I don't look at God as a kind of jolly chap who sits on a cloud. I think he sort of sits inside. And that's really powerful, to know that there is something much bigger than me. Because you don't do a job like the one at the Times without ego. You have to have an ego-driven personality to get anywhere. And to put myself almost second and build this relationship up really slowly. It was like meeting a new person and establishing boundaries and ground rules. And I would say I went well outside the boundaries many times after that. And I've always felt like I've been gently guided back. I've tried to escape, but that didn't go so well. But it always comes back to following what I feel I'm being directed to do. And I've gone from a position where I had a very good salary. I don't earn very much as a photographer. You can't earn very much as a photographer these days. But actually, the work I do is so rewarding in terms of what I give back to people. I work specifically now with people with mental health problems, and trying to help them reconnect with the world through photography is incredibly powerful. I can't describe it. It's so uplifting when people say to you, what we've just done has really changed my life or really helped me out of a dark place.
Yes, let's investigate that, because
I thought you were going to park that for a minute and go somewhere else.
No.
I can't tell you how much I'm sweating.
Because you've come back from Beachy Head. You already said you left your job, so you're out of work. Your family's broken.
Yes.
So you're on your own. So you made a major decision.
Yes.
To move. As I understand it, you've gone from fashion to photojournalism, and now to landscape photography.
Where there is no money. Yes.
And I can't imagine you've had to two huge jumps.
Well, why do it in little jumps? You might as well go with a whole hog and commit. No, I mean, seriously, I wanted to do something that was slower. I wanted to do something that was more contemplative. And photography for me is a celebration of my faith. When I photograph landscape, I don't photograph pretty landscapes. They're not beautiful golden light. I only photograph in black and white. I only photograph in squares. But what I see is the beauty of creation. And that, for me, shows a collaboration between God through the subject and me. And some of the things I am drawn to photograph, they're just like bits of broken fence. And I stop and I think, why on earth have I been asked to photograph this? I have no idea. And then when I share my photography, I write about the feelings that sort of come up. And that seems to touch people. And I've always been able to talk, since the whole Beachy Head thing, I've always been able to talk about my photography, my mental health, and my faith quite openly. I used to be one of those Christians who was ashamed of being a Christian. At the Times, I was called a God botherer. So you don't tend to say very much when people say that. Any other faith, they'd have been condemned for some kind of bigotry. But if you're a Christian, it's like they can get away with it. So I just kind of like sank under the radar. I was a bit ashamed. But now I have no qualm. I've even been told that I should take the word Christian off my website and off my social media profiles because it puts people off. And I said, well, that's the very reason I leave it on. Because people are intrigued if they're interested. And people will ask me about it, and I have no problem talking about it. And if you can talk about it through photography, it makes it accessible. And the landscape side of it came about because of that. It was sitting in fields, just enjoying the beauty of creation and the quiet.
So you started landscape photography almost as a therapy for yourself.
It was a therapy, yeah.
But it's developed that you can use it to help others.
Yes, yeah.
How you meet others over photography, or it's what you write about?
It's a combination of all sorts of things. So I do a lot of talks to photographic groups and different societies. I write about things in magazines. I do Instagram and Facebook, obviously, and then things like this. And then I advertise workshops, and people come. And then I do some work with the West Kent Mind in Sevenoaks.
So what the workshops, what are they?
They're where people come along and we go through some assignments to help them become aware. Because 90% of people are in a state of what I call awake asleep, where they'll leave home and they'll go to the supermarket, or they'll get on the bus and go to the supermarket, whatever. But they don't actually see what's around them. They don't notice. And noticing is really important for a photographer. As a photographer, you're just kind of open. You're supposed to be receiving, but a lot of photographers have a very sort of firm idea of what a picture should look like, and it needs to be perfect. Well, perfection doesn't exist in any way, shape or form. If you look at a tree or a flower, which petal, which leaf is perfect? There isn't one. They're all different. And the beauty of a tree is that in the fact that everything is different. None of the branches are in the same direction. Sometimes they lean to one side because of the wind. They're affected by... So showing that lack of perfection in the world through photography gives people acceptance of their own imperfections, their own flaws, their own weaknesses. And actually, in that when they start to realize their vulnerability as their creative strength, it's really empowering.
So they come to you to be shown their vulnerabilities?
No, they come to me with their vulnerabilities. But most people start a photographic workshop by saying, I'm really bad at taking pictures. And I say, well, aren't we all? Because I take a lot of really bad photographs. And it's fine to take pictures that aren't that great. I take pictures of really random things, pebbles. They're not great photos, are they? But their pebbles are beautiful. And you're attracted to something because you need it at that time. And generally, you need a little pause. So photography gives you an excuse to pause, to slow down, to take in the world, to reflect on what it is about what you're seeing that's appealing to you.
And how do you work with West Kent Mind?
Carefully. We do a series of 6 to 8 week workshops with small groups. At the moment it's on Zoom. And they're very simple assignments just to get people used to seeing and noticing and being aware. And you find that a lot of people with mental health problems beat themselves up a lot. They look at the negative side of them rather than the positives. And when you start within a small group explaining why their picture is good, not why it's bad or whatever, you don't say, that's really rubbish. Because, the brief I normally give to them, the first one is normally colour. And I just say, think of a colour that suits your mood. And photograph that colour all week. Just photograph that colour. Doesn't matter whether it's a cup or a table or a car or whatever, just photograph that colour. And you gradually become more and more attuned to that colour. You notice it more and more. And it's in the noticing that you start to be aware of how much beauty is in your life, how rich your life is.
And you also started some after-school photographic projects with young children.
Yes. I did them at the Amherst School and Riverhead School in Sevenoaks. I mean, photography is a universal language, and children these days need to understand how to communicate, but visually, because photography covers over every language barrier. So I just went along and I offered these services to the school just to see if they would be interested, and it was really successful. It was so much fun. They're the most, 6 and 7-year-olds. If you want to learn photography, take a 6 or 7-year-old out, give them your most expensive camera, and then nervously step back a little bit and just say to them, what can we see? And I got them to photograph things, lines and circles and colour and pattern and repetition. we lost, in the 2 to 3 years that I was doing that, we lost one camera. And that was only because one child decided he wanted to do an aerial picture. So he put the self-timer on, the thing that counts down from 10 when you normally used to run round, and he threw the camera up in the air, and it came down, and it went... He said, "Do you think it's worked?" I was like, "Oh, it's worked." Amazingly, there was quite a funny picture, and it's me like that. But they're so inquisitive, and one of the things we aren't as adults is inquisitive. We lose the joy of curiosity. We want to have everything in its boxes. We thrive on our routines, but actually doing something a little bit different each day, just stopping to pause and look at something, experience something, is really enriching and uplifting. And if you look at the way children work with things, they don't do what they're supposed to do. If you give a child a colouring book, the first thing they do is go, and it's us that say, "Colour inside the lines, little Johnny. It'll look much neater." What we're actually saying is, I can understand what you're doing if you colour inside the lines. But straight away, you're undermining their creative ability. So any of you with children and grandchildren, if you've ever said colour inside the lines, you're responsible for your child's lack of creativity. Because we're all born with the same amount of creativity. It's just we have it conditioned out of us, but we also condition it out of ourselves, because I'm no good at drawing, I'm no good at running, and then we stop, joining in.
Fuji made you a Fujifilm ambassador. What did that involve?
Well, it basically involves them wanting me to sell cameras. And the title for it is, they call you an ex-photographer, which is a little bit weird, because their brand is X Series, so
I see.
X, like X Factor. But they call you an ex-photographer, so when you say to people, "I'm an ex-photographer," they go, "What do you do now?" "No, I'm still a photographer." But I mean, that was really lovely to be given that opportunity to work with them. But it's one of those things. There's a lot of jealousy over that kind of thing. When you're made an ambassador for somebody, there's a lot of photographers who get very jealous and very upset. And actually, it means nothing. It doesn't mean you're a great photographer. It means you can talk to people, and people buy cameras when you do workshops with them. It's more, although it's a great thing, it's a little bit like the Times. It's more about the kudos than it is about what it actually brings, and it doesn't deliver anything uplifting. It's all about money, on their side.
You take groups of photographers around the world, I gather. I didn't quite understand what the significance.
Well, not so much at the moment, because the COVID thing sort of did for that. But yeah, I would take clients around the world to different countries where we would have an itinerary, and I would talk to them about their photography and how they could improve their photography, and then they would hopefully come back with some really nice shots and experience of a country. So I specialised in Central Asia. I really enjoyed that, but that again, I overdid it. The year before lockdown, I did 42 flights to different countries, taking different groups, and I was burnt out again. And I need to practice what I preach.
Yeah.
It's all very well getting excited about things, but actually I need to learn to just say no and to step back and to protect myself a little bit, because I don't. I'm terrible. I always think, what will people think if I say no? I don't want to upset anybody. I don't want to let anybody down. And then I sit and I have these internal battles with myself about, should I be doing it? No, not really. How do I get out of it? Well, you can't now. You'll let them down. So I'm always at odds with there's a little bit of the Times me still in there. It's going, go on, go for it. Go on, you can do it. I'm thinking, well, I've been to the edge. I know where the edge is, and I know what it looks like over the other side, and I don't want to go there again. But I wonder how far I can get to the edge before the wheels come off. Thankfully, my partner is very, very, very good at clipping my wings. She's very strict. So if she senses that my I'm fine is not a genuine I'm fine, I'm confined to barracks, she hides the car keys and all sorts. So. And she has control over my diary now, which is actually a good thing, because I just don't say no.
And you mentioned your son. He's still,
Noah, yes.
You're still in contact with him?
Yeah. He's at home tonight, actually, waiting for me to come back. Well, he's like every 17-year-old. I say waiting. He's in his bedroom playing on his Xbox. I don't think he even noticed I've gone. We have a really great relationship. I mean, Noah's been a huge strength in my life. The marriage broke down when he was 6. And we have a fairly amicable relationship, me and his mum. So he would come over to my little flat in Tunbridge, and the number of nights that he picked me up and sorted me out, because until 5 years ago I drank a lot. I'm sort of 5 years sober now, and putting him through, seeing me kind of like with wine sort of poured over me and everything was quite bad. And he's just a brilliant young man. He's so strong, so determined, but knows the importance of not pushing too far, because he's seen me kind of fall over. And he recently started drinking, not heavily, I hasten to add. His mum drinks Baileys, and he came over, he said, "Do you mind if I have a Baileys, Dad?" I was like, "Oh my Lord, what have I done?"
My little child.
A Baileys, I was like, "No, just stay clear. I won't drink wine." He said, "Because I saw what that did to you." He said, "But Baileys can't be that bad." I said, "At least it won't show in the carpet."
So 10 years ago, you left a prestigious career.
Yes.
And I get the feeling you've no regrets.
Not one. No, it was the best thing I ever did. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and the journey from then to now has been almost impossible at times. But using my faith as my guide has given me different riches. It's empowering, and it takes a lot to say, I am not going to do commercial work. I am not going to chase the dollar. I'm going to follow what my heart and what God tells me to do. And I often sit there thinking, where am I going to get enough money to pay the bills? And miraculously, just enough comes in. I do keep tempting with the lottery occasionally, just to see if he'll give me a little bit more. But no. But it's this thing of commitment to my faith. It's enormous, and it comes above everything else. It used to be the last thing, hidden down in the small print, and now it's the first thing. And that relationship is the most important relationship I have, because off that foundation, everything else is built. And I still, stray out and all the rest of it, but I know where my bread is buttered. So I come back, and I just look back at my life and I think, how shallow was it? Yes, I thought I was helping people. Yes, I played at being a Christian, but not really. It was all about money. It was all about kudos. It was all materialistic. And now it's all about faith. It's all about love. It's all about hope. And I'm a very different person to the person who worked at the time. I couldn't go back to that job if you paid me. And that is funny. I was in London on Thursday, and I walked past the High Court where the Wagatha Christie trial is, and there were so many photographers out there, and Rebecca Vardy was just coming out of the High Court, and I've stood outside the High Court with all those photographers, and it actually made me feel sick to think I was once part of that baying crowd. And I phoned Moya, my partner, and I said, I can't believe I'm standing outside the High Court somewhere that I sent photographers to, and I've stood myself, and I actually feel sick at the thought of having done it. And, you know, you shout at people to get a reaction, and they're not nice things that you shout. And it made me feel a little bit ashamed. And then I thought, well, actually, you don't need to feel ashamed because you've stepped out of that. You've moved on. You know, so while it's not okay, and there's a lot of things I did as a news photographer that I'm not proud of in any way, shape or form. But in a way, I knew no better at the time, and now I know better. I would never do it, and I would never advise anybody to do go to the lengths I did.
Paul, there are a number of other things, but I want other people to have a chance to ask questions. Like your charity work, your cycling from Land's End to John O'Groats. I mean, there's so many things that I've seen written about you, but I think I need to say, from my point of view, thank you, so that people can ask you questions. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
Paul Sanders.
Paul, you've survived so far.
I'm
How are you feeling?
I'm properly hot.
I have an observation. Is this working okay? I have an observation and a question.
Yes.
You seem to be a contradiction. You say that you're a people pleaser, you're shy, and then you say at the times you have to have a big ego. I can't quite equate all those things.
It's a mask. Yeah. So you know you've seen Russian dolls where you
yes.
Yeah. I'm the real me is the tiny one.
Right. Okay.
You know, but we all have that shell around us. We all have to have our armour that we put on when we go out every day. But when you're in that environment, your armour has to be really thick. And I am genuinely shy. I do a lot of talks, and I get very anxious before I start. Even coming here tonight was bad, and I did think, I don't want to wish you ill, but I thought, I wonder if Nick has got COVID.
Well, the bad news is that if he'd had COVID, there would be somebody else sitting there who wouldn't be as good as him. The question I have, my wife and I, we had some friends staying with us, and we took them to Beachy Head. And there was a chaplain, a woman, a lay chaplain. And she was walking around just generally being there, watching people.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the person who spoke to you was one of those people.
Yeah.
Have you seen them since that event?
No, I haven't. I've seen the chaplaincy. I've actually been up there doing Berlin Gap I've been to doing workshops and things. It is quite a strange experience, but no, I haven't seen the person that...
But they know your story?
I think they must do.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
But I couldn't even tell you what the person looked like.
No, well, that's not so important as they actually know how you've come through. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Right, they're not really intimidating. They're actually quite nice. You have to when you look at people's passive expression.
Yes.
They don't really tell you what's happening inside. They always look a bit glum.
I'm just glad they stayed awake.
They'll stay awake. They stay awake. But now we're going to see. Has anybody got a question they'd like to ask?
Can we start with an easy one?
Actually, he doesn't ask easy questions. I'm sorry.
When you came to faith, effectively real faith, after your experience with Beachy Head, did you feel that was a real intervention by the Holy Spirit? And do you feel that the Holy Spirit's it's the Holy Spirit that's been leading you through your life from there on into...
Yes, to both. I actually feel, looking back on my life, that God tried to intervene on a number of occasions before that, but I just wasn't listening. There are a number of things that I can think of that lead me to think that he's been there all the time, and I've been the one who's not been paying attention for whatever reason. But yeah, when that happened, it was a massive wake-up call.
So you feel as though he's had his hand on your shoulder?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
This is probably a very quick answer. I read the Times, and I much prefer it in the compact edition. When you get to retire one day, it's much better for reading in bed. But my impression is recently they've had a lot more pictures in of a sort of artistic nature, often of animals and so on. I mean, if you had something that you felt was really good, could you send it now, or would that...
Yes. Yeah, they would welcome it.
Right.
You would stand more chance now. If you had a really nice, I don't know, autumn picture, a beautiful sunset picture that they could tie to a news thing, it would probably stand a good chance. But you are up against sort of 20-odd thousand other pictures. Pick a quiet day to send it. A Sunday is always the best day to send your pictures, because the Sunday for Monday paper is the one that's the hardest to fill. But just so you know, the compact version was designed for ladies as a priority to read either on the train or in bed.
There you go.
There you go.
But you only film in black and white. Does that?
I do only
limit it?
photograph in black and white, yeah. But I would never send a picture to a newspaper. Never. Done that. Been there. Don't need it.
But they wouldn't. I thought you said they would value a picture sent in by you.
Oh, no, not by me. By is it Rosemary? Yeah, by Rose. So if Rosemary gets a really lovely picture of the lambs gallivanting in front of the sunset, and sent it on a Sunday, it may stand a chance. Oh, me?
Yes.
Oh no, I don't. I once I walked out of that door, I drew a lot. I never want to have a picture in a newspaper again. Although I have had pictures in the newspapers, but not the Times.
Paul, if they are colours, are your favourite colours black and white?
No, my favourite colour is orange.
But
That stumped you.
Yes, indeed. but it was just interesting. You said that your photography nowadays is largely black and white.
It is, yes.
But the world which God seems to have put us in is a world full of colour.
It is, and colour is really important to a black and white photographer, because colours have tones. I choose black and white because I like the simplicity. When you photograph in colour, a lot of people go, "Oh wow, look at the colours." They don't look at the content of the picture. They don't see the texture or feel the mood. They just see the colour. So I like to keep it very simple. And I enjoy black and white. I enjoy the simplicity of it, although it could be described as a large grey area, I suppose. But I use colour a lot in black and white to draw emphasis to things, because all those different colours represent as different tones, and how you photograph them and how you light them draws different emphasis to different areas.
Paul.
Man behind you first. There's a man behind you with a microphone.
What a blessing to have you here. So wonderful.
Thank you.
I've got two. I can point it at my mouth. I've got two questions. Have you been to a war zone and taken pictures?
Not a huge war zone. I've been to conflict areas, but I haven't been to anywhere like Ukraine. I've worked in the Middle East. I've worked in Northern Ireland. I've worked in areas of Africa during conflicts.
Mm. And when you had that moment when your light meter almost went over the edge, did God speak to you then?
What, when I was on Beachy Head?
Yeah.
I think he spoke to me through the person who was actually with me. I was in too much of a state of distress to hear anything or see anything properly. But the fact that this person appeared at my side at the right time with the most calming manner was unbelievable. And it was like an answer to prayer, because I'd been begging for help, but I hadn't really noticed it. And I think, this person just spending time with me, just sitting there, listening, asking questions, not offering their own experiences. It was just ask question, listen, ask question, listen. Didn't judge, didn't offer an opinion, all he did was reassure that I was okay.
And finally, we've had some mental health issues in our own family. If you're looking out for somebody that's at the brink, what would you look for?
What would I?
What would you look for?
Well, having had experience of this only last Sunday when a friend of mine went missing, thankfully is found safe and well, but it's not always, but often it's a case that people retreat. They retreat away from their life, their family, their friends, don't return phone calls, don't pick up text messages, don't respond to emails. I mean, I never answered the door. I wouldn't go out during the day. I would go shopping at night when nobody was about if I needed food. You remove yourself from life. You distance yourself because you feel a burden to everybody. So I would be looking out for that. And then I would say to somebody I thought was struggling, are you okay? Where do you think you're going? And I would also at the same time be talking to one of the many mental health charities that offer such incredible support. There are some incredible volunteers that work for these organisations that give advice to the person, the victim, if you like, and also the family and friends. It's a huge thing now because people are talking much more openly about it. And it's okay not to be okay. And to get that reassurance from somebody is really important, to be able to say, I know you're not okay, it's okay. It's fine. What can we do to help? And that's, it's like holding out a hand. But don't be surprised if they don't take it straight away.
Like that, can you hear? Yes. The question ties in with the question behind, actually, and it was, what are the main ways in which you feel God speaks to you? You've often said you feel his hands on his shoulder, or you feel he's there.
Yeah.
What are the main ways he has spoken to you over the years?
That's a really good question. You didn't ask that question. I think when I've chosen to listen, and now I do choose to listen, I realise I'm enough as I am, that I'm not perfect, that I have character flaws, but actually in recognising them, they're a strength. He gave me a gift in my photography, but not too much of a gift that made me hugely big-headed, so that I was accessible to people. He's always, I always say a little prayer before I do a talk. And I always ask for the words that he needs delivering to whoever it is in the room for me to speak them. And I often don't know who that person is, and I get no knowledge of it, but very occasionally somebody will stop at the end of a talk and say, "You could have been describing me, thank you." And that's kind of a little bit of giving back, I suppose, because that's sort of what's happened at times with me. So I like to think that God's given me the gift of sight, and I use that gift to reach other people. But he's also given me, thankfully, a very gentle nature, a bit too gentle at times maybe, and patience. And often I'll hear a little voice in my head say, "Patience." I'm like, okay. And then he gives parking spaces. I always pray when I'm in Sevenoaks for the parking space angel. Always delivers. Ooh. This looks like a serious question. Did you notice the repositioning on the chair? I'm really intimidated now.
You have my stroke now. I'm not even sure that this is a question or you can answer it, but many years ago I did reflexology.
Oh, yeah.
And I had a editor from a national newspaper come to me, and he every week used to say, you won't break confidentiality, you won't say I've been, because my job would be on the line if it was found out. And it bothers me, from your experience, you're a person that also committed suicide, and I'm not just talking about newspapers, obviously all high-pressure jobs. It's said on the media that we talk about these things now, and it's okay not to be all right, but it doesn't seem to be coming across with the heads of organisations.
No.
And I'm just concerned that how do you break that?
I think it's really hard, because there's this image that the people at the top are flawless, that they make all these decisions, and actually most of them are struggling, and it's a toxic. The newspaper, I can't speak for other environments, but newspapers are very toxic, and people will exploit a weakness to get ahead themselves, and that's one of the things that within newspapers they don't like. I mean, when I came out and told people that I was suffering with depression just before I left, some people literally, I could have said I had the plague. People stepped back from me, physically stepped back, because they thought it would be catching or it would be damaging to be in my company. And these were people that I'd worked with for a number of years. Some people had a very different reaction, but it's the toxicity of being seen as being weak. And, for whatever reason, there's no trust in somebody who's got any kind of problem.
There's a lovely J.B. Phillips translation, paraphrase of a verse in Corinthians. My strength shows up best in weak people.
Yeah.
Which I think is wonderful encouragement.
Yes. Yeah.
It just seems self-defeating as well for the people that can't support their best employees.
Yeah, it is completely self-defeating. And it sets a terrible example as well.
Anybody else?
Oh.
Why did I expect that, Paul?
Yes. Check how much cake's left on that table.
Paul, could you tell us a little bit about your plans that you believe God's calling you into your future? We've heard a lot about your past and your present, but where is God taking you next, please?
Mark, that was a very searching question. So the work that I did with West Kent Mind, which was a little project we named My Mind's Eye, I'm hoping to build that into a little charity. The problem with photography is it's quite expensive, but it's also really accessible, because I imagine most people in the room have got a smartphone with a camera. Most people, not everybody, I imagine. But photography is much more accessible these days. But photography workshops, where, I imagine very few of you would think, do you know what, I'll go to Tuscany and do a photography workshop. Probably doesn't come on your radar. But, and that happens a lot. They're out of people's price range, because they're not cheap to put on. And what I want to do is make photography as a resource for people who are struggling with any kind of mental illness, accessible through the My Mind's Eye charity. It's taking a bit longer than I thought it would to get it going, but it will get going. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, say some prayers, that by autumn or Christmas it might have its own little registered charity, and we can start getting some fundraising done so that we can actually use that money to help people who don't have the funds to get access to visual creative help. And it will start small, but hopefully it will grow. That's where I think we're going. However, he may change his mind. We know he works in mysterious ways.
A last question, anybody? Right, when you get this charity going, make sure you give us the
Oh, I will.
Give funding, because you might find people here would like to kind of contribute or support.
Oh, that's very kind.
I used to be a reader of the Daily Mail, and I found that actually it made me quite angry. I don't know if that's just me. It actually made me angry and quite resentful against refugees and a whole range of people. And I switched to the Times, and that just passed. I wasn't conscious of it anymore. And I actually thought, I mean, you know that Waitrose used to do free newspapers if you spent. Well, sometimes I got the Mail, and I always regretted it because of the way I felt at the end of the day having read it.
Yeah.
I just found that really interesting. When you were saying we're being manipulated by the way we read papers, I wouldn't recommend the Mail to anybody, really. No. Sorry if you're a Mail reader here, but that's just me.
Yeah.
You say about shyness, and you were sweating and all the rest of it. I want to thank you for being prepared to sit here and talk so personally and answer questions from a group of people. I don't think you know the majority of people here.
No.
Now, it's obvious this guy here knew what your future planning was.
Mark.
Yeah, so he was kind of provoking you in that sense. But
he wasn't a plant, though. I didn't know he was
No, but it's actually good that he asked that question. We finished on it, because that's now pointing us to the future.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you for being so open and so willing to share in this way. And all I can say is thank God for that light meter at the bottom of Beachy Head.
Yes.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much.